Hey, welcome back to the channel. And in this episode, we're going to continue with the 1990 ZXR750 build. And to be honest with you, I have no idea what you're going to see today. It's going to be a whole whack of different stuff, and just basically whatever I feel like doing, that's what I'm going to do. So stay tuned. It's minus 20 out here this morning, and just getting ready to blow some snow. The 7-foot blow already on the tractor. There's a bit of plowing. I spent the last basically the last 36 hours snowing out here, so I thought I'd just show you the frame of the swing arm with all of the grease and the crap cleaned off. So all that's left on here now is black paint. So this has all been this is all rattle can paint, so this will come off with acetone. But you can see that obviously this stuff was never taken apart before it was painted. It was just painted while it was all together. The underside of the swing arm really doesn't have much paint on it. The inside of the swing arm doesn't have much paint on it. And the same sort of thing with the frame. It's really all the outside. Back here, there's no paint. There's no paint on the inside of this. So the good news is it just makes the whole process of cleaning paint off much easier. So yeah, it's just there's a little bit more grease and crap to clean off, especially these areas right here. The side where the chain is on usually takes a few passes to get it spotless and degreased, but it shouldn't be too bad. All the black paint removed off the main frame. So now it's now I got to prep that and prime it. For the most part, the original silver paint is still on there. There's a few spots where it's kind of gone through to the aluminum underneath. If there's not too much of that, I'll just put some spot primer on it, etch primer. So right there you can see just a little spot where the paint is completely off. This black that you see there, that's actually the epoxy primer that was from the factory underneath the silver. That's not leftover rattle can paint off this thing, but yeah, there's still a few spots that I've got still a little bit of black paint down in there. I got to take care of that, but by and large, not too bad. The swing arm looks pretty atrocious. Somebody did sand these things before they rattle canned them, so that's where they've kind of burned through the silver paint to the black epoxy coating underneath the factory paint there. So first coat of primer is on everything that needs to be silver. Once that's dried nicely, I'm going to, well, a couple of things have already had 2 coats, but I'll get a second coat on everything. But before I do that, I'm going to give everything a rub down with some burgundy Scotch Brite, because I just like to make sure everything's kind of etched before I put subsequent layers of whether it's primer or paint on. So that'll be the next step. We'll get all this stuff scuffed up again, and then it'll get scuffed up one more time before we head to the paint booth. So Should be okay. I haven't primed any areas where, you know, the silver paint was fine. I've just kind of sanded that down and scuffed it up. Anywhere where, you know, the paint was worn off or there was spots that were down to the bare aluminum, that's really where I've focused my attention. So getting quite lucky with the wheels. Fortunately, these were not painted. This is the original factory paint on here, and it actually scrubs off with Scotch-Brite quite easily. So I'm going over it. I've just got like a degreasing agent on here, and I'm just using that to lubricate and scrub with a 3M Scotch-Brite. And yeah, just kind of, you can see here, it's just in here, it starts to wear through the paint very, very quickly. It's I'm not going to take all the paint off. I'm just going to scuff it up, and then anything where I get down to bare aluminum, I'll put an etch primer on there. But yeah, it's a much easier process when you haven't got secondary aftermarket paint on the set of wheels, for sure. So the bulk of these wheels have been cleaned and scuffed and, say, semi-prepped for some primer. The fact is there's a few areas on the edges and even a couple of spots on the rim here where like there's some corrosion there. So some of that stuff needs to be like sanded just so it's a little bit smoother in the finish. Anywhere where there's glazed lettering and whatnot, these embossed pieces on the rim, I've scuffed those up with wire brush. So that's all been done. And then the other thing that I have to do before I get too excited about painting this stuff or priming it is all the bearings are going to come out before I do any painting. And the reason for that is, in my experience, there's been some difficulties in the past getting these bearings out. The ones in the 89 I did weren't too bad. I didn't suffer too much to get those out, but in the first 1990 I did, they were an absolute bear to remove. So the last thing that I want to be doing is banging around a newly painted set of wheels as I try to smack those bearings out. It's just a recipe for chips and damage and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a lot easier. There's less risk of damaging stuff if I play with getting those bearings out before I paint them. And then putting the new bearings in is pretty simple. That's not a difficult exercise at all. So yeah, take the bearings out before you paint your wheels is my advice if you're going to change the bearings. And you know, when you're down this far in a restoration, even if the bearings feel fine, which these all do, you know, for the cost of the bearings, why would you not change them out? That's kind of my thought on it. If you're really pinching pennies, which is a real possibility these days with the price of stuff, then, you know, just check that the bearings are running smooth and there's nothing rough or notchy in there. And I'm sure, you know, you get away with just leaving them in there if they feel fine. But I'm going to replace these ones. All right, so all of the frame parts are now painted. I had just enough paint and just enough flat clear coat to get this job done. So you can see there. But yeah, it looks fine. Looks good. I'm gonna leave that now overnight. The rest of the day today. Pick it up in the morning. That should be everything I need. This multi-gloss clear coat works quite well. As I said before, depending on how much activator you put with it really determines the level of gloss that you get. The more activator, the glossier it is. So there you go. That's the stuff that I'm using. 5-Star Extreme Stealth Clear Multi-Gloss. The only thing I have left is a little bit of activator because I was using it at 6:1, which is the most matte finish you can get. Those ones were actually quite easy. So I think what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to put the new bearings in there as well, and that way I'm just going to tape them off. Just less chance of the new paint getting damaged when I'm installing new ones. That way I'll have the new ones in, tape them off, we'll be good to go. All right, so before I start hammering in the new bearings, I just thought I'd show you up close in case you have never done this before. Most people probably have, but I thought I'd show you anyway, just in case. The process of getting a bearing out, it's kind of hard to tell. All you see is me sticking a punch inside the wheel and beating on it mercilessly. And so here's kind of what's going on inside there. So you got one bearing on one side of the wheel. You have this tube that runs through the center of the wheel between the bearings, and then you have another bearing that sits on the other side of the wheel. So the two bearings are basically sitting in, let me see if I can just zoom back out here a second. There we go. So the two bearings are sitting in the wheel, kind of in the aluminum part of the wheel, and this is kind of sitting in between. There's a lot of void space around the center of this thing. On some wheels, one end of the tube is captured. On the front wheel of the ZX7, I think one side of the tube is kind of sitting in a groove right against the bearing, and then the other bearing is just kind of sitting against the tube. It doesn't have a seat per se in the wheel. I'll show you that in a second. But the whole idea, and this is what kind of makes it kind of tough sometimes to get these things out, is you have to get a punch long enough. This one's actually a little too small, but it'll be fine for demonstration purposes. You need to get it basically on an angle like this inside the tube. So if this punch is inside the tube, you want it on an angle so you can hit the inner race. So what you're trying to catch is the edge of the race right here. So if you hit on that side of the race, the idea is you hit on one side and then you move over and you hit on the other, and then you keep going back and forth this way through the center of that tube, and eventually this will come out. It's very easy to do unless these bearings are pressed in so tight that you can't get kind of a purchase on the edge of this inner bearing race. So the inside diameter of the tube is basically the same as the inside diameter of the bearing. And so if you kind of look down, if you put those together and you kind of look down the center there, when those things are perfectly aligned, you really can't catch the edge very easily. And so what you tend to try to do is catch it enough so that you can loosen this tube up. And if you can loosen the tube by just moving the bearing just a little bit, you can usually kind of move the tube, I'm exaggerating here, but you can move the tube off to the side. And when you move the tube off to the side, you get a much bigger area where you can actually stick that punch on and drive it out. So that's the idea. And I have had scenarios where it was almost impossible to move that tube out of the way, and in those cases I actually had to fabricate a special tool to be able to get on the edge of that bearing. I tried an internal bearing puller, so something that fits in the center here where my finger is, it kind of spreads out, and I tried to pull it out that way. I was on the first 1990 that I did. It was exceptionally difficult to get them out. But yeah, perseverance won the day. I made a little tool to get in there. I'll show you that just so you see what I made. So this was a piece of half round, I kind of call it half round bar. You can kind of see the profile of it. And I chose that. I had it kicking around, but the fact that it's kind of, you know, the general shape of, you know, the edge of the bearing, it kind of fits quite nicely on the edge. And the whole idea is if you use something that's square or too round like that, then you're not going to get as much purchase on the edge. This thing being a little bit wider worked quite well. So what I did was I kind of bent the end up a little bit, because again, you've got something that long going through the tube. You can see you can quite easily hit the back side of that tube and still not reach the front, especially on that rear wheel. So and I'll show you what I did. I flared the end of it. I used a grinder, and I just kind of made a little lip on that. All right, so let's try that again with the camera working properly. Hopefully you can see that. So I just kind of, as I said, I ground it out, kind of tried to make this backside hollow a little bit, and then I ground away the edge here where my thumb is rubbing, and left this very, very shallow, sharp lip. And what that allows me to do, if I need to do it, it'll get under the edge of that tube. If I put it inside here like this, basically it allows me to get under the edge of that tube. There we are. There's a better shot. So that's by grinding it hollow and having that sharp edge on there. You can kind of see how that helps to get underneath that tube, and then you can kind of get it to rest on that bearing much easier. All right, so here's what I used to put the new bearings in. It's basically a seal driver set. These are all made of metal, steel. They come in all kinds of different sizes, and so basically you just got to pick the one that fits the outside diameter of the bearing. These are the old bearings. The new bearings are in this cooler bag that has been they've been in the freezer for the last couple of days because I got sidetracked. So they've been frozen to minus 19 Celsius, which is cold, very cold. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to warm up the inner races of these things, just so that I can just make the whole job a little bit easier. And I'll just pick the right size seal driver to smack these guys in. Just makes the process a whole lot easier. So basically you just mount them on this handle, and then you can just smack it on the top and drive them home. So I'm going to do the cush drive first in the press, and then I'll do the wheel bearings after that. I've got to be careful, of course, that I don't set my wooden floor on fire while I'm doing this. I'm hoping I have enough length on my press here, otherwise I'm going to have to put another something on top there. You can see the bearing going in now. It's important that the seal driver that I'm using is not so big that it fouls on the edge of the hub, because otherwise it will become impossible to remove. Okay, so I'm going to use I think it's a 46 millimeter to drive the front seals in, because that makes sure that this doesn't get stuck in the wheel. And then I'm going to use 51 millimeter to drive the rear bearings in, because they're about 52 millimeters. That'll make sure I can get enough purchase on the edge of the bearing race on the outside without getting the tool stuck in the wheel. So, all right, so let me show you what I mean, especially with this front wheel. about the order in which you need to put the bearings back in these things. So on this side, you'll see there's actually a lip in here. So if you drop the bearing in, it can't go any further than the seat on here. If you flip it over, look at this side, there is no seat. That's not because it's missing, it's just the way they are. Although both of the previous sets of front wheels I've done on the ZX7 are the same as this. So if you start to drive a bearing in here, chances are you know, you're going to whack it and it's just going to drop straight into the middle, and good luck getting that back out of there. I don't think you'd ever fish that back out. So my suggestion would be, this is not the place that I want to start putting a bearing in. What I want to do is I want to put it on this side first. So then I'll get that one seated, then I can put the center tube in, and the center tube will stop the other bearing from falling into the center of the wheel. Just a little bit. Is the tone change. So when you're hammering it in and that bearing is moving down, there's one particular sound that it's making. As soon as it bottoms out on that seat, the sound will change. It gets much higher pitch. So then that's when you know that it's fully seated. And then you just kind of want to double check that you can see the ring. There's a groove in there where the circlip goes. You want to be able to make sure that you can actually see that. And I can quite clearly see that, so that's good. So next thing I'm going to do is flip it over. So as I said before, it's quite obvious that that would just fall straight through there, and then you'd lose it in the inside of the wheel. So you've got to make sure that that goes in the center. It seats, and there's a little groove in there for it to sit into. A little bit of a warm, not too much. These things go in fairly easily, so. Now, one thing you do have to be careful of with these wheels is because there is no seat on this side for that bearing, you're not going to necessarily hear the tone change as drastically once it's in the right position. So it's possible, if you're not careful, you can keep on driving that bearing and it will pop the bearing out of the other side, and then this one in turn will drop into the middle, and the whole thing will just turn into a giant shit show. So just be careful. What you're looking for is just to make sure that ring is seated. When I say ring, you want to make sure that you're not pushing it so far that you can't, or you can't put the circlip in this side again. So it's pretty good, I think. I'm actually going to tap this side back down because I think I drove it about 1/2 millimeter too far. I'm just going to give it another. Make sure that seats back down again. There. So that way, this is the side that has the seat in here. So I want to make sure I can always hear it seat properly. So this side is good. I can see the groove for the clip, and same with this side. So again, order of operations: seat the bearing that has the seat in the wheel first, turn it over and put the tube in, and then seat the other bearing. Don't drive it in too far. Make sure you can see the groove, and then not a bad idea to go back and reseat this side. That way you know that they're both in as far as they need to be. The rear wheel is super simple because it doesn't have any of the issues with having one side that doesn't have a seat in it. They both have a seat, so you can just go right ahead and smack those in just the same as you would on a normal front wheel or rear wheel or whatever. So yeah, I just find the ZX7 front wheels are a little bit different to some of the other bikes that I've done, so it's just worthy of note. So the only thing I would say before I drive the bearings in for the rear wheel is when you buy the rear wheel bearings, typically you're going to get 3 bearings. 2 of them are identical, like these two. One of them has a slightly larger inner diameter, and the one with the larger inner diameter goes in the cush drive because there's a bushing that fits in there. So make sure you put the right bearings in. I think they all have the same outside diameter. It's the inside diameter that's different. The 2 smaller ones like this, they go into the wheel, bigger one in the cush drive. So before I start priming these wheels, it's important to mask off any of the areas where you don't want paint to be. So I've just put new bearings in here, so I don't want anything on the bearings. I don't want anything on any of the hub areas where, whether it's brake rotors or anything else, has to mount. So in this case, I've got tape on the flanges here, the mounting surfaces for the rear rotor, and I'm just going to go around with my craft knife and cut these to shape, and then that way I don't get any paint on the mating surfaces. For the front wheel, same sort of idea. I just masked off the entire machined part of the hub that doesn't get paint on it, and that's got etch primer all over it now. So that'll sit for a good 24 hours to dry, and then I'll give it a light scuffing with a Scotch-Brite pad, a fine Scotch-Brite, just to make sure that the red paint will stick to it properly. So the wheels are all primed. One over there, it's the front one, rear one, and yeah, I used this stuff. I've used it before, this etching primer. It seems to work quite well. It is only a 1K primer. It's not a hardened 2K primer, which is unfortunate, but it's just kind of the way it is. I end up having, when I paint this stuff, I go to my buddy's paint booth, and with smaller pieces of work like a couple of wheels, it's kind of a long way to go, to be honest, to be kind of transporting wheels, you know, half an hour in each direction. So go there, prime them, come home, and then, you know, to go there again to pick them up and then bring them back and all that kind of thing. So for small jobs like this, just from practicality's sakes, I end up just doing a rattle can job with the primer at home. I've never had a problem with this stuff peeling, so yeah, that's just the way I do it. The downside to rattle canning this stuff here in the shop is that, I mean, you can't really tell, but there's a gray haze in the air, which means there's all kinds of dust. Basically, it's just the atomized primer dust that's already kind of floating around and dried, but it means I'm going to end up spending a whole whack of time dusting all these bikes off again, because it just makes a mess. So one of the problems I had when I took the wiring harness out and was disconnecting all the wires was one of the male connectors off the side stand switch broke. It got stuck in the I couldn't separate it, and with my pulling and tugging, and I mean, I don't pull on the wires, but I try to grab the connectors, and this one, even though I was trying to be careful, unfortunately this came off here. So what I've got here is I have all kinds of different, I have a box that I keep all my different wiring connectors in for this kind of repair. So I've got this one. This is the same size as that one. It's about 4mm. I got a new insulator to go on as well. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the insulation off the wire. I've got my cheapy wire strippers here. They seem to work okay. I've got a couple other different sets as well, but that'll be fine. And then tool here to crimp the bullet connector onto the wire. So the way these work is this first one, my fingernail is, this guy here. That one clamps onto the insulation, and then the second one here closest to the tip of the bullet is the one that actually clamps onto the bared wire. So yeah, these things tend to go a lot better when you've got these crimping tools to get the job done, I find. It tends not to work so well if you're just using pliers. There's other kinds. I mean, I've got, you know, depending on what your preference is, I've also got these guys, which depending on the gauge of wire you're using will strip the insulation off. There's also larger tools for crimping, and depending again the kind of thickness of wire that you're working on. But there's also these kinds of strippers as well I have. So yeah, whatever works for you, whatever you have. So there, that's just the amount of insulation that I've taken off there. Not a ton, just enough to make sure I can get a good connection in that bullet connector. That's all I need. So there's the first crimping done on the insulation. So you can see the second one is here, and I haven't crimped that down yet, and that goes onto the wire. So there we have it, all crimped down, so that should do the job just quite nicely. I did not end up putting the insulation on because the insulation is actually on the other side. It's actually on the female connector side, so that's similar to this one. That's the female in there, and the female has the insulation on it, so I didn't need to add any to this one. All right, so as far as color selection goes for the ZX7, in this case, it's going to be done as a ZXR750 European colors, the red, silver, black. So what I've decided to do, I don't have any panels here from a red, black, silver European bike to get color matches from. So my decision has been as follows as far as the colors go. So the black, I want a conventional black, and you might think, well, black's black. No, it isn't. Black paints are, you know, they can vary wildly, even if you're not spraying a metallic black, just a straight black. Some of them can have a green tint to them slightly, some of them can have a slightly blue tint to them. In this case, I'm going for a General Motors 8555, which is what I will call a traditional straight black color. There's no sparkle, there's no blue tint, green tint, whatever tint sort of to it. In the sunlight, in whatever light, it just looks black, and that's what I'm going with there. For the silver, which I haven't yet purchased either, it's going to be based on matching the silver in the decals. So the ZX7 decals, or the ZXR750 decals for this bike, don't have any red on them. They only have black and silver. So I've asked the decal manufacturer to give me a kind of credit card size sample of the silver vinyl that the decal is made from. And that way I can take that into the paint manufacturer, the paint shop, to get it matched. So that's what I'm going to do for the silver when I get to that point. And for the red, which is what's in this can, I haven't even opened it yet. I bought it. All I've done here is I just went in through their color book, and that number right there, the 18S0627 RC Red, that's the color that I picked. And why did I pick that particular color? Well, it wasn't easy. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of red colors. I didn't want anything that was kind of too pinky colored. I didn't want anything that was too, too burgundy. So that kind of narrowed the field down to maybe, 30 different colors of red. And so I had some photographs of bikes, and of course photos, when you pull them off the internet, every red ZX7 or ZXR750 is going to look slightly different depending on who took the picture and the lighting and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, it just ended up me picking a color that I thought would look good in the end. And so this is the color I'm going to live with. You're seeing it for the first time, as am I, because as I said before, I have not opened this can yet. All I saw it was on a color swatch that I picked. So we shall see how this looks. So that's the red. So I think that's going to be fine. I mean, what you're seeing here, as I look through the camera, through the phone here at it, it looks pretty darn similar to what I'm seeing in real life. In real life, I would say it's slightly more vibrant. So I wanted a color that was obviously like a good vibrant red, because you know the green colors that are on the ZX7s are quite vibrant as well. So you need something that's going to pop just enough, and I think that'll do. It's I mean, it's as good as any. And since there are really no bikes of that color scheme here, no one is ever going to know. All the framework is back home here, and everything looks pretty good. It's yeah, it's kind of what I expected. It's what I was aiming for. As I've said before, these bikes did not have a gloss finish on them, so this has got a quite a flat or matte finish. And that looks good. I will say that I feel like I'm getting much further, much faster on this particular project than I did with the other one for some reason. I don't know why that is, but I still haven't done the valve clearance adjustments yet on this bike. But once that's done, the frame can now go back on the engine. And quite quickly, I think this is going to start to look like a bike again, especially once the wheels get painted. Once these wheels are painted, they're going to have to sit, I would think, for, well, last time I did it for 3 weeks, because I just don't want, you know, paint chipping and tearing and pushing off, because when it's fairly fresh, the paint stays quite soft for a while. So they'll sit for at least 3 weeks. So I'm going to guess in a month from now, you know, we'll have an engine, a frame, forks, wheels, and all the rest of it. It'll look like a bike again, which, yeah, that's reasonable progress, I would say. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. So yeah, I think I'm going to call it a day. And in the meantime, I hope you're enjoying it. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And we'll see you in the next video.